Welcome back. Welcome back to Tearing Down Babylon. Thank you so much for tuning back in to Tearing Down Babylon as we come to understand a higher perspective, also known as the God perspective. So, for those of you just tuning in, some of you might be asking, what is Tearing Down Babylon? Tearing Down Babylon is removing the man-made perspective so that we can manifest the God perspective. What is tearing down Babylon? Removing the man-made perspective to manifest the God-made perspective. Today, we're going to learn about heaven on earth. Heaven on earth. So, this is a very important subject. The reason why we must come to understand heaven on earth is for one simple reason. If you do not understand where you live, you may not understand what your surroundings are or what exists in your surroundings. But today we're going to understand that heaven exists right here on earth. Yes, heaven exists right here on earth, and we're going to come to understand that earth and heaven are actual places. So with that, thank you again as we begin with our first scripture. And again, remember, all scriptures come from the sacred text. And the sacred text, some people, like here in America or the Western world, they call it the Bible. But the sacred text is given or was inspired by our divine creator and written by chosen vessels here on this earth. So, according to the sacred text, which is the law of the universe, it says in Genesis chapter 1, verses 7 and 8. Genesis chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. And this is what it declares. And God made a firmament. Now, before I get into Genesis chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, I want you to understand, in chapter 1, in Genesis chapter 1, this is when we learn about the history of heaven and the history of earth. All right? So, in chapter 1, in Genesis chapter 1, verses 7 and 8, it declares this. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. So, the firmament. A firmament simply means a space. And notice something. It says here, He divided the waters from above the firmament and the waters below the firmament. So, what I share with everyone is this. What are clouds made out of? Water. What are oceans, lakes, and rivers made out of? Water. So now you come to understand that clouds are above us, which are all made out of water. And then our oceans, lakes, and rivers below us are all made out of water. So, what's that middle space called? That middle space is called heaven. That middle space is called heaven. I didn't call it heaven. Your creator called it heaven. So, if we now come to understand that the space that you and I, those of you tuning in, you and I live in is heaven, shouldn't we ask the question, well, if this is heaven, how do we operate in heaven? That's a good question, and here's the answer. Heaven. Heaven is a spiritual atmosphere. Heaven is a spiritual atmosphere. So, we've learned in our previous episode that we live in an interdimensional world. We learned in our previous episode that you and I, live in an interdimensional world. What does interdimensional mean? You have two dimensions of the current world that you're living in. You have the spiritual, which is heaven, and the physical, which is earth. So far we've come to prove in Genesis chapter 1, verses 7 through 8, that you live in heaven, which means you live in a spiritual atmosphere. So the question is, how do we operate according to that spiritual atmosphere? Here's the answer. In Galatians 5, verse 16, in the sacred text, we go back into the sacred text and we read Galatians chapter 5, verse 16. And this is what the sacred text declares. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these two are contrary, the one to the other, so that ye cannot do things that you would want to do. But if ye be led by the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Now that the works of the flesh are manifest, you are not under the law. So here it is. Why do I point out in that scripture? First and foremost, for you to operate properly in a spiritual dimension, you must first and foremost choose what dimension you're going to operate accordingly. Why? Because things of the flesh don't agree with things of the Spirit, and things of the Spirit don't agree with things of the flesh. Simply meaning this: you were taught to do things one way, but your inner spirit, your instinct, your gut instinct, people call it intuition, people in Hawaii they call it their na'au, but your gut instinct is your inner spirit. So your inner spirit, and here's a good example, your inner spirit will say one thing while your physical consciousness will say something else. Many of you have met people and you say, wow, they're such a nice person, but your gut instinct tells you, be careful of that person. Now are we beginning to see there are two different worlds going on? And it depends on who you listen to. If you listen to your conscious or your outward reactions, then you will live your life based on emotion, feelings, and experiences rather than facts. Remember, feelings are real, but they are not the facts. I'm going to say this again. Feelings are real, but they are not the facts. Why? Your feelings is a manifestation of your thought process. Your feelings is a manifestation of your thought process. I've had individuals who they feel something and so they react and they operate according to their feelings. And when I've asked them, why would you do something of that sort? They say, well, because I thought he said, I thought she said, I thought they were going to do this, I thought they were going to do that, so that's why I reacted that way. Well, based on what you thought and based on the fact, what was the reality? It always comes to the facts. The reality always comes to the facts. So I encourage everyone, live your life based on facts. So when you walk in the Spirit, you will not, it says here, according to the sacred text, that you will not indulge in your physical side, meaning all of your non-factual emotions will not rule you. Your non-factual emotions and sometimes your inconsistent thought process will not rule you. Why? Because if you choose to walk in a spiritual dimension, that spiritual dimension will free you from that low frequency human dimension or that physical. So here it is. For the lust of the flesh, the lust of the spirit goes against the flesh, and the flesh against the spirit, meaning they're always in battle with each other. Some of you tuning in may be wondering, oh, no matter what I do, I take meditation classes, I do yoga, I go on to these retreats, I read these books, I do all these things, and I'm still not at peace. Why are you not at peace? I tell you why. It's because your physical is battling with your spiritual. It's time for you to make a choice. It's time for you to make a choice. Are you going to live and operate according to all of your physical, or are you going to live and operate according to your spiritual? Now, we are interdimensional people, which means we have a physical, tangible body. And yes, we have emotions. And yes, we have thoughts. But when you choose to operate in your spiritual, your true self, who is created in the image and the likeness of God, and who is created on the highest frequency, and who was created by love and is love, notice this: when you operate in your true self, what will happen is your true self will have authority over your physical self. And when you react, you're going to react out of love. You're going to react out of divine wisdom. You're going to react out of divine knowledge. You're going to react out of your divine nature. So your physical nature will come under the authority or come under the subjection of your spiritual nature, which means you now operate at a higher frequency, which means that you are now operating in heaven. Welcome to heaven. That's the point. For those of you tuning in, thank you for joining us in Tearing Down Babylon. For more information and for more podcasts, please visit us at www.templeofzion.org. Again, www.templeofzion.org. Or follow our YouTube channel, Joseph K. Figueroa Ministries, Joseph K. Figueroa Ministries. But stay tuned as we reveal more on Tearing Down Babylon. All right. And when you choose to operate in your divine spiritual nature, this is what happens. You will not be under the law. Now, hold up. What do you mean not under the law? Now, there are laws of the land that keep everyone in order or presents natural order, but under the law simply meaning you will not be under the physical laws of nature. When you are operating under the divine inspiration and guidance of your Creator, you will be able to manifest everything that you have been already given in your spiritual dimension into your physical dimension. Simply meaning, if you need peace, you already have it in your spiritual dimension. But here it is. If you have not yet tapped into that, I would encourage you to tap into your divine nature so that you can take the peace that your Creator has already given to you in your spiritual nature and now manifest it in your physical nature. See, peace, happiness, joy, all of these things have already been given to you in your spiritual nature, but you have not yet come to understand, for some of us, how to transfer it from our spiritual into our physical. There are a lot of people who say, oh, if I just had this much money, I would be really happy. Well, there are people with that much money and they're still not happy. Some people say, well, if I just looked this certain way, I would get all the guys, all the girls that I want. There are people who look that certain way and they still are lonely. So it doesn't matter what your physical nature is or your physical atmosphere is. It all depends on your spiritual nature and your spiritual atmosphere. If your spiritual atmosphere is not connected or it's out in the darkness and you're lost, it will reflect in your physical nature. Why? Because your physical nature will rule you, and you will not have the ability to bring all that under your divine nature. According to the sacred text, Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. Genesis chapter 1, verses 9 and 10 declares this: "And God said," your creator, divine, supreme, the I am, said, "Let the waters under heaven," now that we understand the foundations of heaven, or the foundation, one of the foundations of heaven, "let the waters under heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good." So, based on these sacred texts, based on the facts, the Creator who created all things called, after all the water came together to create what is called seas, the dry land appeared, and that was called earth. Why do I hone in on that? It's because many of us have been taught, indoctrinated, that we live in earth. No. That's for another season. That's for another episode. We're going to understand where we actually live. You've already come to understand we live in heaven, which is a spiritual atmosphere, okay? So, you've been indoctrinated that you live in earth. Well, I'm going to share with you the knowledge that you live in heaven. The dirt that you step on is called earth. According to Genesis chapter 1, verse 10, it declares, "And God called the dry land earth." So now that you understand that you live in this beautiful place called heaven, and you've learned in our previous episodes, for those of you just tuning in and saying, well, why do all these bad things happen in heaven? Well, I'll tell you why. Because mankind, who was given authority in heaven, in this particular heaven, they choose to do bad things. God never chooses to do bad things, but individuals who have dominion in this system choose to do bad things. Now that we understand heaven, here's the question. Well, now I understand that I must operate in the spirit, because that's how you operate in heaven. But how do you transfer? How do you transfer all these beautiful things that are in the spiritual dimension into my physical dimension? How do I transfer that? Here's the keys. Here's the key. So tune in. Tune in. This is a very, very important part. You all ready for this? The laws of manifestation. The laws of manifestation. The first law is declared in the sacred text in Matthew 16:19. It declares this. Now this is Christ, the manifestation of the voice of God, which became the Word of God. Here's what he said. "I will give unto you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Wow. So even Christ said, "I will give unto you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." Well, we're all excited. What are these keys? And here's the key. "And whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatsoever you shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." What? What do you mean? Okay, here is the key to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth is bound in heaven. Case in point, fact number 1. We are taught that heaven and earth are connected. Heaven and earth are connected. Okay? Number 2. What you bind. How do you bind something on earth? And how do you bind something in heaven? How do you loose something on earth and loose something in heaven? You ready for this? In Proverbs 18, according to the sacred text, in Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, it declares this: death and life are in the power of your tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Death and life are in the power of your tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. Simply meaning, all you chatterboxes out there, all those tuning in who like to talk. If you love talking, you will eat all the fruits of what comes out of your mouth. Simply meaning, if you are gossiping king or queen out there, remember this: you are producing negative fruits, and that's the reason why your life is full of drama, because you are producing all of this in your atmosphere. For those of you who enjoy speaking truthfully, guess what? Your life is going to be flourishing with truth. For those who love to speak kindly, your life is going to be flourished with kindness. For those of you who like to speak with love, loving words, kind words, caring words, your life will and your atmosphere is going to be filled and resemble what you speak out. So, with that being said, the moment, remember what we shared earlier in this podcast, where your feelings are real, but they are not the facts. For example, if you feel a certain way and you speak it out, what happens is you just manifested based on your feelings, which, by the way, was not the facts. So, for many of you out there who are wondering why things are not happening, why you're still in the situation you're in, why you have not yet come out of the situation, some of you have gone to other spiritual leaders and said, well, what do I do? And they said, you need to pray, you need to do this. All of you in the prayer chains, prayer circles, all these kind of things that are going on. All you got to do is speak the right thing. Here is a physical manifestation. And this is based on facts. When your body, I'm going to speak about health here. When your body starts to sniffle, when your nose has a sniffle, and your body starts to cough, and then your body starts to get a little cooler, and your body starts to go into something called cold sweats, and all these different types of things. For the uneducated people out there, this is what's happening. Your body is fighting off a virus. Your body is naturally fighting off a virus. That is what's happening in your physical dimension, okay? Your physical dimension, for example, if I go somewhere and then all of a sudden I'm not feeling too good, guess what? My physical dimension, my body is built to fight off viruses, okay? That's what all of our bodies are built to do that. Now, here's the thing. Our physical dimension, that's what's happening. But because of lack of knowledge, because of ignorance, because we have been indoctrinated with different thought processes, remember, the man-made perspective versus the God perspective. So, the lower frequency perspective says, when you cough, you're sick. The God perspective doesn't say that. So this is what happens. So when someone is feeling, because they lack education, they don't understand their own body that is fighting off a specific virus. It could be a cold virus, it could be a flu virus, whatever virus it may be. Your body is naturally there to fight it off. So what happens is you open your mouth, and according to the sacred text, it says, death and life are in your tongue. So what happens is this. All of a sudden, you say, oh, I'm sick. Now, guess what happens? You just released that manifestation into your physical body. And poor thing, your Creator gave you a body to fight off all these different viruses, and the moment you speak it, you are actually inflicting yourself, and you are putting those viruses, that energy of death upon you. Wow. Talk about manifestation. It's all right there in your tongue. Your Creator, remember He said, based on law, let us create mankind in our image and in our likeness. Meaning, you have the same ability that God has, and He wants you to be manifesting these abilities, but not for evil purposes, for good purposes. So, what's happening? Now that you've come to understand the knowledge that you live in an interdimensional world and you must operate interdimensionally, you got to take this knowledge and say, hey, the next time your nose gets the sniffle, the next time you start coughing, say, body, I thank you for recovering so quickly. I thank you for divine healing. I thank you for divine wisdom. I thank you for divine knowledge. I share this testimony with many of my sessions and many of the students who come to me. This is what I share. When I came to this understanding, when I get a little sniffle, this is exactly what I say. I say antibodies, I speak strength into you, I speak life into you, I speak health into you. And thank you so much for doing your job. Because if you weren't doing your job, I would not have the ability to go out and do all these things and run 100 miles a minute if you weren't doing your job. So thank you. And do you know what? It's been proven in my personal experience. 30 minutes, done. I have never experienced things like this until I started to apply the laws of this universe, which, by the way, are all there in the sacred text. It's all there. It was written in this law of the universe. It was written in heaven, and that's where we live. We live in heaven, and physically we are here on earth. We are here. The ground that we step on, the dirt that we've been indoctrinated to call dirt, is actually called earth. So guess what? It's heaven is in our atmosphere, and earth is the dirt we step on. Isn't that powerful? Cool stuff. So now that we've learned this, here it is in closing. Authority, and your authority, here's what it says in Galatians 6:7. Be not deceived. Your Creator, God, the I Am, the Supreme, is not mocked, meaning what He says will come to pass. So don't think, oh, I read that, but it's not true. It's going to come to pass. For whatsoever a man soweth, he shall reap. People call it karma. Japanese people call it bachi. Hawaiian people call it, oh, see, that's what happens to you. Whatever it may be, but the laws of this universe is, if you do something to someone out of negative energy, you're going to get negative energy back. And that's the reason why, remember what we revealed in our initial podcast, Christianity, Buddhist, Catholic, Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, it does not exist. It's a man-made structure, which means whatever you say, whatever you do, this goes for everyone. You don't even have to be a proclaiming Christian for this to work in your life. Why? Because this is the law of the universe. Your Creator created you out of love. Why? Because He is love. So, He loves us so much that He's like, I don't believe in all these factions. I don't believe in all these segments. I'm going to just speak laws into existence that's good for everybody across the board. See? Everyone across the board. Which means the moment you start speaking life into your situation, some of you may need some financial assistance with something. Rather than saying, oh, I need this because I don't have that. Remember, you're speaking all these manifestations into existence. So here it is. Look within yourself. Say, okay, let me practice this thing. Let me practice what I'm hearing, that I'm tuned into, the heaven on earth thing. Let me practice this. Let me start saying, Divine Creator, God, Supreme, I am. Thank you. Thank you so much for providing me with what I need. Thank you so much for giving me this thing. Thank you so much for restoring this thing. Thank you so much for guiding me into this thing. All of a sudden, you will start to manifest heaven on earth. So until next time, join me again as we continue to tear down Babylon together. Mahalo.